When you think about the U.S. Constitution, you probably think of these huge, grand ideas and complex clauses. But what if I told you that one of its most dramatic stories is hidden in a single sentence, tucked away right at the very end? It's a story of political genius, strategic rebellion, and a move that was, well, arguably completely illegal.
Yep, that's it. Article 7. Just 26 words that honestly look like a bit of procedural housekeeping, right? Just a simple instruction on how to get this thing up and running and make it the law of the land.
But here's the kicker. What if that simple instruction was a direct violation of the law at the time? I mean, what if the very act of creating the Constitution actually broke the rules of the government it was supposed to replace? Now that's where our story gets fascinating. All right, so here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll talk about why Article 7 seems so, well, boring. Then we're going to dig into its illegal start and the genius strategy behind that number 9. After that, we'll look at two totally opposite takes on its legacy. Was it a tool for consensus, or was it really a coercive political program? And finally, we'll see how this whole debate is still echoing today.
Okay, so at first glance, Article 7 seems totally straightforward. The Constitution becomes law once 9 of the 13 states give it the thumbs up. Seems clear enough, but here's the thing. The controversy isn't in what the words say. It's about whether the founders had any right to say it in the first place.
All right, let's get right to the heart of it. To really get why the founders were on such shaky legal ground here, we have to look at the old rule they were just tossing out. This is the moment they decided, you know what, we're playing by a new set of rules now. And this slide just lays it out perfectly. The old law, the Articles of Confederation, was crystal clear. Any changes, needed unanimous approval from all 13 state legislatures. Unanimity. But Article 7, it just completely torches that idea. It says, nope, we only need 9 states. And not even the legislatures, they bypassed them and went straight to special conventions. I mean, by the letter of the old law, this was just flat out illegal. So you gotta ask, how on earth did the Federalists, the guys pushing for the Constitution, justify this? Well, they had some pretty bold arguments. Some said, hey, the Articles are basically a broken treaty anyway. States have already ignored it, so it's void. But others, like James Madison, went bigger. He basically argued that in a national crisis, you can't let paperwork get in the way of saving the country. The people have a fundamental right to change their government, period. Okay, so why did they do this? Why these specific kind of shady choices? Well, this wasn't some accident. Oh no. This was a brilliant piece of political strategy designed to smash through 2 massive roadblocks. First, the move to use state conventions instead of the legislatures? Genius. They went right over the heads of the politicians who would lose the most power under the new system. It let them frame the whole thing as the will of the people, not the states. And second, that 9-state rule, man, that was all about breaking the curse of unanimity. Under the Articles, one single state, and yeah, everyone was looking at you, Rhode Island, could just veto everything forever. 9 was still a high bar, a supermajority, but it was actually achievable. And here's the real goal, the crucial thing to understand. This wasn't just about hitting a magic number. It was a psychological game. The whole plan was to get a few states on board fast, to create this feeling that it was inevitable, like a snowball rolling downhill. As more states joined, the pressure on the rest to either get on board or get left behind would be just immense. So what's fascinating is how we look back on this strategy now. Historians are totally split. So let's start with the first major interpretation, the one that sees this 9-state rule as something that actually made the Constitution better. This idea really comes from Professor Michael Rappaport. He argues that requiring a supermajority wasn't about twisting arms. It was actually about forcing everyone to compromise and build a really broad consensus for this new government. So according to this idea, that high bar of 9 states forced the framers to write a document that couldn't just be shoved through by a slim majority. They had to make compromises, like building in strong protections for states' rights to get the smaller states to sign on, and maybe the biggest one of all. When it looked like things were stalling, the Federalists had to promise a Bill of Rights to win over the skeptics. So in this view, the 9-state rule is kind of the unsung hero that gave us some of the best parts of the Constitution. But there's another way to see this, a much, much more cynical way. This interpretation sees Article 7 not as a way to build consensus, but as a straight-up weapon of political coercion. And Professor Mark Graber is one of the main voices here. He basically says, look, the founders never actually wanted a 9-state union. The point of the number 9 was to get to 13. It was a tactic designed to scare the holdouts into falling in line. So Graeber's argument goes like this. The whole process created this dynamic of fear. The fear of being left out became the main reason states started ratifying. Think about it. The state conventions couldn't suggest changes. It was an all-or-nothing, yes or no vote on the whole thing. So once a few states said yes, the question for the others completely changed. It wasn't, is this the best possible government anymore? It became, oh man, can we really afford not to join this new country that's forming without us? And you can see that momentum building right here on this timeline. First, you get the small states like Delaware jumping on board quickly, then a big player like Massachusetts joins in. But the key moment is June 1788, when New Hampshire becomes the 9th state. Boom. The Constitution is now officially the law of the land for those 9. So at that point, what are powerful, crucial states like Virginia and New York supposed to do? They're faced with this stark choice: join the club or become a tiny independent nation surrounded by it. It was pretty much an offer they couldn't refuse. So here's the thing. This whole debate, was it consensus or was it coercion? It didn't just wrap up in 1788. It planted the seeds for two totally opposite views of what the United States even is. On one side, you've got the vision of Chief Justice John Marshall. He argued that because the Constitution was approved by the people in these special conventions, not by the state governments, it created one single unified nation where federal power is supreme. But on the other side, you've got the view that, well, eventually fueled the Civil War. The idea that each state, acting on its own, joined a compact and could, therefore, choose to leave it. I mean, we're talking about two completely different ideas of America, and they both trace their roots right back to how you interpret this one sentence. So, what's the big takeaway here? When you really look at it, it's so clear that Article 7 is not some dry legal footnote. It's actually one of the most explosive and consequential sentences in the entire document. It really teaches us that the birth of the Constitution was this work of strategic genius. But it was also, let's be honest, legally controversial. It proves that a simple procedural rule can be an incredibly powerful political tool. And most of all, the debate around it just rips open these fundamental tensions in American government that we are absolutely still wrestling with today. Consensus versus coercion, and the constant tug of war between federal power and states' rights. And all of this leaves us with one final big question. Was the Constitution born from a principled consensus, a moment where everyone came together through compromise? Or was it a masterclass in political hardball, a necessary move born from crisis and fear? The answer, just like the Constitution itself, is still very much up for debate.